I'm hoping that everybody will see The Wild Wild East, Part 1, Studies in Judges, Holy Smoke and Mirrors. I just keep adding these little things that make so much of a difference in your lives. The Wild Wild East is going to be a series. Now, I was thinking this afternoon that I would eventually get back to teaching on a number of subjects within the Wild Wild East series. Now, you tell me what you think. My master's thesis was on Balaam, who will come up in the series, and then Joshua a little bit more, and into the book of Samuel for Pick Up the Kings, because it's just another series, kind of like, and this is important, like biblical patriarchy. Why are we in a patriarchal society, which underscores why not women? That's another series we've been doing. Weird Angel Verses, which I haven't done enough of those, and everybody keeps asking me to do more, so we might do one of those next month. There's the series on the inspiration of the scriptures, like what is it and how does it work? Creation and recreation is another one. I used to call it No More Sea, or the beginning and ending of the cosmic conflict, but I sort of ended up putting it under the moniker of creation, recreation. These are series. And the Wild Wild East is going to be another series because of the nature of the period of time between Moses and David. Okay, the secret of God is, of course, probably my favorite. So we're going to delve into that period between Moses and David a little bit tonight. And it'll include a little bit more of like Joshua and his sidekick, Caleb. They come up a lot. But before we get into that, between theocracy and kingship, big theological words I'm using here, don't be intimidated. A time in Israel's history that had Israel finally kind of occupying the promised land, and we'll get into that a little bit as why I'm using the word kind of. But the leadership of the nation of Israel was somewhat disjunctive. That's what led to the Judges period, which I call Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Yay. So we need to clear out the smoke ahead of us and look in the rearview mirror a bit, which is why I called it Holy Smoke and Mirrors. But before we do that, a word from our sponsor. So who's our sponsor? It's the Making It All Fit Society, also known as the BURG, the Biblical Unitarian Research Group, and there are 2 new members of it, sort of maybe an announcement tonight, more formally later. John Crouch is going to be part of it, and so is Richard Larmy. Both accepted an invitation to be part of that. Now, the sponsors of much of what is done here on Research Night, the word from them that I want to talk about before I get into Judges is the whole deal of God's rule. And this came up to me as I tried to tie the land of promise into Christianity. But theocracy, where God is king, has a lot to do with the land and, of course, God being king. So we do not see God as king yet here on the earth, nor Jesus for that matter. So don't let people pull the wool over your eyes and say Jesus is the king now. And the land to a Christian, the land, which is what we're in this. See, the Wild Wild East, it's a land. It's Israel, Palestine, Canaan, whatever you want to call it. And it's called all 3 of those in Scripture. The land doesn't mean as much to us as Christians as it would mean to a Jew. And we're not spiritual Jews. But the land is something that is promised, okay? So it's in the not yet category of theology, because as you'll see when I'm teaching on the book of Judges, their full occupation of the land doesn't happen, okay? They don't drive out all the people that they're supposed to. But God sits on a throne, yes, we know that, but it's in heaven. And remember Jesus saying is praying, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That's why he says it, kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Nobody's king on the earth yet. Not God, not Jesus, not you, not me. And we're not the king's kids. That would be Jews who are the king's kids. The kingdom is Jewish. The land is Jewish, and this is important. Why, Bob? Well, you'd think we'd get this, but here's where we're going to go one more slide, and then we'll get into Judges. This came back to me in spades this week as I was discussing the Old Covenant with a couple people. Let me just read Ephesians for you here, verses 11 through 13 in chapter 2, for those of you who aren't seeing this. Ephesians 2, 11 through 13. Therefore remember you that formerly you, the Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcision by the so-called circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by human hands. Remember that you, Gentiles, at that time were separate from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers from the covenants of covenants of promise. Michael Lewis, I want you to listen carefully. Having no hope and without God in the world, yeah, they're in a bad place. All four of those things bad. But now in Christ, you who formerly were afar off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. So why am I starting this series with this verse? Well, that big blue thing in the middle there, covenants of promise. Paul talks about in his time period, there were covenants of promise that the Gentiles were strangers to. Now, that doesn't say new covenant, but the new covenant is one that had promises. But there are other covenants with promise. What are they? The land covenant, Abrahamic, some people call it, where God has promised them the land, the Holy Land, the land of what? Promise. That's a biblical phrase. He promised to them. Did they have it? No. Okay, did they ever have it? No, not to the extent that God said they'd have it. And that's one of the things that's paramount as we get into the book of Judges. But here's another thing that's paramount for you who are listening here about the covenants of promise. I was going to tell you the other ones. Another covenant of promise is the Davidic, okay, which is part of the old. Remember this, right? The land part, the throne or the kingship of David. The Davidic covenant has not yet been fulfilled. They're both part of the old covenant, and then there's promises in the new covenant. You will not need to teach your neighbor because everybody will know the Lord from the least to the greatest. By the way, that hasn't happened yet either, but those covenants of promise are real. Two of them that I mentioned, the land and the throne, have not, the old covenant is not done yet, folks. That's the point I'm trying to make here. The new covenant is not yet here. It may have been inaugurated by the Lord Jesus in his blood and by drinking the wine and bread inaugurated, but you're still teaching your neighbors. I mean, you're still not seeing the things in Jeremiah 31 that were promised. It was a covenant of promise, but you also have yet to see the land of promise to Israel in their clutches. You have not seen the throne of David in Jerusalem with the Christ sitting on that throne. So the old covenant has yet to go away. And Paul knew this. So this came up this week because we're dealing with the land and we're dealing with the kingship here in the series that I've just inaugurated. I'll go back here, called the Wild Wild East, because we're between where God was somewhat ruling through Moses. He's kind of had somewhat of the rule. He definitely had the rule on the Sabbath day at creation. Okay, that was kind of the reason why there were 7 days, because that's how God's kingship was set up in heaven. But then we get to the Davidic rule, where Israel wants a king, and the accentuation, if I can say that, of the land of Israel, which is where the children of Israel were going in, the exodus from Egypt to the land. Well, we're going to get to this. Let's just get to it. Remembering Moses, we're going to go with it. From Egypt to the Holy Land. Yeah, Moses. And here's the things people remember about Moses. This is the brief introduction. to get past Moses to Joshua and Judges. Baby in the bulrush, he grows up in Pharaoh's house, kills an Egyptian, has to go away. Where does he go? To Sinai. He goes to the desert, meets his future father-in-law, Jethro, who's a Kenite. Then there's the burning bush. He takes the hint, let my people go. Israel gets out of Dodge, the Red Sea incident, 40 years of crazy in the book of Numbers, which, by the way, in the Hebrew is in the wilderness, not the book of Numbers. It's the Bamidbar is the Hebrew. Bamidbar, meaning in, Midbar meaning wilderness. The book's name is Wilderness. Just like Genesis isn't Genesis, the Bereshit. It's in the beginning. So Numbers is Midbar in the wilderness. Genesis was Bereshit, which was in the beginning. That's just the names of the books. Okay, after the 40 years of crazy, we have the spies going into the big land, the land flowing with ye olde milk and honey. That's a biblical phrase. And we want to look at this incident, the spies, before we get into Judges, because when you get into the book of Judges, which we will get into a little tonight, we're certainly not going to get into all chapters because it's way too long and you need some background as we're getting into the wildness of the East. We want to look at the spies because who are the two that, remained and were allowed into the promised land? Joshua and Caleb. Joshua gets a book. Caleb gets a little bit of chutzpah as we get into Judges. So Moses doesn't get to go in, though. So you guys, we're not getting into that tonight, but what's up with it? Here's a little timeline. Look, some of you really dig these PDFs. I make these PDFs so that you can have them for study later, so you don't have to look them up on the interweb. But here's a good timeline. It gives you the major battle or incident, it gives you the date, it gives you some of the biblical references where, there's, back in Egypt, you got the order of Pharaoh to kill the firstborn of Egypt. Moses is born, all this stuff. Moses flees to Sinai is in there. The burning bush returns to Egypt. All that stuff. And then the Exodus to the Red Sea at the bottom. And that's just for your viewing pleasure and reading enjoyment. You can look them up. So how we get here from there. There is Egypt. And here is the Holy Land. Let's look at the history of Israel before and after Joshua. Before and after Joshua, so that you can understand and make some sense out of the Judges period, which comes, of course, right after Joshua's death. The Exodus was the pivotal event. God named a book after it. Can't get any better than that. And, of course, I gave you the book of Numbers again. Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the second law. That's the reason that was given the name. We won't get into that tonight. That was the time of Josiah. Moses, here we go. Man of God, huge for the Israelites, right? But he's gone. Moses, my servant, is dead. Okay. Joshua steps in. There's his sidekick, Caleb. And when they're gone, what's a nation to do? Well, they trust in judges, or as it says in the word, God gave them judges, okay? Really kind of a cool series of events. I'm framing this for you so that when you read the book of Judges, look, one of the things I enjoy most about these sessions is just reading scripture, big swaths of it. And, if I can help with the, Near East cosmological input and the, the way the prophets wrote, so much more the better, so that when you're home on your own and you see some of these things, they fit like a hand in the glove, not a foot in the mouth, right? So how do we get there where we're going? We're going to Montana soon. That's a Frank Zappa. I told Ray McKee I would use Frank Zappa tonight, and there it is. Going to Montana soon. Going to Montana soon, meaning Israel, land of promise. But we're not going to be a dental floss tycoon, which is the other part of that Frank Zappa song. So here we go. Sorry for all the old references. Those of you who are listening in the 22nd century and have to endure Bob's movie references about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, blah, blah, blah. And this one with Frank Zappa. Yes, Israel was going to Canaan soon, and here it is. Exodus 3:8. So I, who, the angel of the Lord from the former context, have come down. There's an ancient Near East. Why is an angel coming down? Why can't he come sideways? Well, because the ancient Near East prophets writing the Hebrew scriptures, heaven was up. And so angels come down. So I came down by God, literally, to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them from that land, love the word land, to a good and a spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Somebody can work that phrase. I'm not sure what that means, but had to be fun. I like honey. So to the place of the Canaanite and the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Those are the big, well, there's 6 of them. Usually there's 7. There's a big 6 there. There's one more, probably. You know, you go through these records in Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges, and if it's not one, it's the other of the Canaanite or the Amorite. Canaanite in the land, Amorite on the right side of the land. We'll get into a little bit of that tonight. So the angel of the Lord's coming down, and he's going to bring them to this land. And here's another one, Ephesians, right? Oh, I already told you this. That the land is important because of the covenant of promise made to Abraham back in, where is it? Like Genesis 15, maybe it was 13. I can't remember. It's not in my head. But promise of protection. Okay, here's another one, Exodus 23. Behold, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way. Because we're leaving Egypt. We're going to the big land. And I'm going to send, God says, an angel. Oh, I love it. Angel of the Lord. To bring you into the place which I have prepared. Now, wow. Not only had he prepared it, he prepared it like 400 years before that, but because of stupid decisions made by the sons of Jacob, sell your brother into slavery. Nice folks. Be aware of your siblings, folks. Sell you into slavery. You know, be careful. What did Jesus say? You know, they wanted him to come out and meet his family, and he goes, wait a minute. I can't. Who are my family? Who are my mother and my brothers? You know, be aware of it. Jacob, Joseph had some real fun brothers. Anyway, 400 years, God has prepared it here in Exodus, but they should have had it a long time ago. That's another teaching. Be on your guard before him. Why? Because he's a bad angel. Be on your guard before him and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious towards him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. That verse, I don't understand. But don't mess with the Zohan, okay? Just don't. But if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. My angel will go before you. Love it. Bring you into the land of the, here they are again, the big 6. And in the red here, I will completely destroy them. I will, says the Lord. And you shall not worship their gods. You shall not serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall what? Utterly overthrow them, break their sacred pillars in pieces, but you shall serve Yahweh your Elohim, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. Okay, how big do you think this should have been, this angel dude? Okay, really big, folks. We discount angels in the church today, in our society, in our ministries, because we think if we think too much about angels, we won't think enough about Jesus. What a bunch of it's like I heard today. I guess that's not a really good analogy. Maybe it is. I just want you to know that you've got your big boy jeans on. You got your big boy pants and dresses on, ladies and gentlemen. You can think about angels all you damn well please. Don't let people fake you out because they think you're angel crazy or demon hunters or anything like that. Angels show up in hundreds, can you say that again? Hundreds of scriptures. Why do you think? Because the prophets wanted us to know about what they do for us. This angel was pretty darn important to the Israelites. So I told you we're going to look at the spies. First of all, you know that the angels are going ahead of. We'll get into that some other session, because one of the things I do want to handle is Balaam. And I already started the PowerPoint. So, the spies get sent into the land, and then after the spies come back, they wander the 40 years, and then they go down into the right side of the Dead Sea and up the right side of the River Jordan, okay, which is where Balaam comes in. And I'm going to do a session on the Wild, Wild East and Balaam, because my master's thesis was on Balaam, and I haven't visited it in a while, and it needs revisiting, because I don't think since 1982, I mean, freaking, how many years is that? 37? Wow, maybe less than that, but needs to be revisited. So we'll go doing that. And Balaam comes up the right side of comes up on the right side in the land of Moab, where Balak escaped. So why am I talking about that? Because we're talking about getting to the land, and we're looking at once they're in the land at the Book of Judges. But I'm giving you some background to remember how we got there from here. Okay, I got here from there. So the spies were sent in by Moses, and here's your little ditty. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Send out yourself men." And they took one from each of the tribes. And I haven't quoted the entire section here in Numbers. If you see halfway down, I'm into verse 17 already. But verse 18 is important. See what the land is like, whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, how the land is in which they live, is it good or bad, how the cities in which they live, are they open camps or fortifications? Look at this. This is awesome how Moses sent these guys out. How's the land? Get some fruit and vegetables. Sorry. But a little bit further down in the green, make an effort, then get some grapes. Oh, golly. Now the time was first for ripe grapes. So they went up, these spies, verse 21. Sorry, I went too fast. They went up to spy out the land, the wilderness, from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rahab, and I'll show you that. And when they had gone up into the Negev, which is the far south area, they came to Hebron, where Ahiman and Sheshai and Talmai, here they are, the descendants of Anak were. Those, by the way, are Nephilim. Those of you who are familiar with Anak from other teachings. And then verse 23, then they came to the valley of Eshol, and from there cut down a branch, single cluster of grapes. They had to carry it between them, and some of the pomegranates and the figs, and they called the place blah, blah, blah. Point is, big guys are there, and big grapes are there. So we have some genetic engineering going on, because you don't get big grapes that two men have to carry them between themselves unless you have genetic engineering. So what else waited for them? They returned from spying out the land, continuation from the section I was quoting. Then they came back at the end of 40 days. And again, I'm highlighting here with this section, this slide, and they saw okay, here's the report, verse 27. They told him, we went to the land you sent us. It does flow with milk and honey. And by the way, with this fruit. Nonetheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. Now, why would they be very large? Oh, by the way, the descendants of Anak are there. Amalek's there. And then here they are again, the Hivites, or the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amalekites, the Canaanites. I should have highlighted them all. And then Caleb quieted the people, verse 30, and said, oh, by the way, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, because we're going to surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, wait a minute, we're not able to go up against these people. They're too big, they're too strong, they have bad breath, and they're the sons of Anak, by the way. Okay, so they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report, and it says later, the land that devours its inhabitants. That's a pretty fruitful phrase to be using here. And all the people whom we saw in it are the men of great size. Now that all the people has to be taken with a grain of salt. Not everybody was all of great size, and you'll find that out as you just read the Bible. But if there were people of great size, think Goliath of Gath, sons of Anak, other people on the way into the land of promise, by the way, Og, king of Bashan, Sihon, king of, well, where was he king of? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, we'll get to them. Anyway, we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, so we were in their sight. So the spies were not really trusting in the Lord, shall we say. So I thought maybe Professor Peabody, golly, I'm doing it again, throwbacks, and the Wayback Machine would show you that this is where the spies went. Left side of the River Jordan. That's on the bottom of the map. There's where they started. I think I did a better map just so you could have it. Well, I'll go to the map here. So they started here in Kadesh Barnea, went to Arad, went to Arad, Hebron, Bethel. Then they went from Bethel to Shechem, Beth-Shan. Beth just means house, all the way up from Beth-Shan to Hazor to Rahab. That's where the spies went. Look at the distance, and they were there 40 days. So here's the spies traveled north secretly 3 weeks from the desert of Zin. Love that. I mean, some of these things in the Bible, where were they? Oh, they were in the desert of Zin. I love it. And then they went to Beersheba, where Isaac, and here's a throwback because it's important. 300 years previous, that's where Isaac settled. So there were records. It's not like the children of Israel. I know it's been a long time. Maybe they didn't have written records, but some people knew that Isaac, Jacob, Abraham, by the way, had lived in this land, and they were going back. Well, they went up past Shechem, where Jacob had set it up an altar, and they went up all as far as Rehob and Lebo Hamath, as far north of Canaan, near Damascus, which is, that's pretty far up there, modern day Lebanon. And on their way back south, they passed places like Hebron, where Abraham was freaking buried in a cave. And here's the large cluster of grapes, which of course they renamed the valley of Eshcol, and Eshcol means cluster, before returning the 40 days to the Israelite camp, blah, blah, blah. So in they went, back they went, I showed you the path, and then here's where I wanted to, I'm giving you background here to the book of Judges. Here's the so-called track out of Egypt, over the Red Sea, down into the Sinai Peninsula, picked up some laws, they don't show the spies here, but before the 40-year wilderness, which I point here, that circular thing, they probably just went in circles. The wilderness of Zin, Kadesh Barnea, that's why they went there. So, or why they stayed there for 40 years. And then finally they went into Canaan by route of where I've shown the arrow. So those of you that can't see this, get the PDF. Of course, I'll send it out when I send out the notification on this teaching. But we'll eventually get into understanding why they went in this area on the right. We're going to get into it a little bit because it matters for the book of Judges. End of Moses' term of leadership. Basically, east of the river Jordan, he was not allowed in. And because the 12 spies, only 10 of them were not allowed in, but in the middle of this section here in Numbers 32, I say that they did not follow me fully was the reason the spies were not allowed in, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, because they followed the Lord fully. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and they ran around the desert for 40 years, the wilderness. The word midbar is the same word, desert or wilderness, depending on where you are. Means the same thing. So we'll go on. So, I know what. I was reading this because the section in Numbers, I almost forgot. Numbers 32 is said, Moses says, this is what your fathers, he's talking to Gad and Reuben, did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land, meaning the spies. For when they went up to the valley of Echol and saw the land, they discouraged the sons of Israel so that they did not go into the land. And of course, blah, 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 God's anger burned. So he's talking to Gad and Reuben here, the leaders of Gad or the house of Gad or the tribe of Gad, however you want to portray it. The context previous to Numbers 32:8 will tell you. But it's Gad and Reuben. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to go into the land, and here's why. Because Gad and Reuben were on the right side of the Jordan. And that is a telling thing, and why Moses had to rail on Gad and Reuben, saying, you're just like your fathers who didn't want to go in. You're scaredy cats, and I'm not going to have it. Everybody's going to go in, and everybody's going to fight for each other. We're getting there. Joshua to Judges, we're almost there, and it's like half the time. I don't know. But we go fast here. Joshua was given the reins of power after Moses died, right? We're not going to get into much of Joshua. The tribes go in, and Jericho, you remember that? 110 cornets close at hand. That's from The Music Man. Still going with the music and the movie references, Bob. Okay, there were trumpets and falling walls. Okay, Jericho, 110 cornets. River City, Iowa, never mind. Then what? Bet you can't tell me what happens when the book of Joshua. Not much. Not many people can, and I can't. And we'll get into that sometime. But Joshua and Caleb stay together in the land, the only two spies allowed, right? And the tribes were allotted, and I just showed you the allotment of the tribes in this map as best, it's a little slippage, and we're going to get into this map a little bit more later because it matters in the book of Judges, okay? Oh, and then Joshua and Judges tell a huge story, and by the way, they're intermingled, and we'll see that. I give you a little bit of a chart here, Joshua's timeline, where you've got some scriptures here at the bottom. We're not going to look at it because we're not in the book of Joshua. You'll see this again when we do handle the book of Joshua, because it's still in the wild times at Ridgemont High. It's still in the wild, wild east, because the time of Joshua is the first encounters with the Nephilim clans in the land of promise. And we'll get into those. They're still around at Judges, and you're going to ask why. Because they didn't, as I say here, conquer the enemy. It's a little suspect to say they conquered them. The next section here that I show you in Joshua, dividing the spoils and warning the victors, that'll come up, and that's important stuff in the book of Joshua, but we're trying to get to Judges. So juxtapose Joshua and Judges. We're almost there, folks. Joshua, the sons of Manasseh, could not take possession of these cities because the Canaanite persisted in living in the land. That's Joshua. Here it is in Joshua again. Now it came to pass in many days that the Lord had given them rest to Israel. So wait a minute. So how could they have rest in Joshua, but the sons of Manasseh could not take possession of the land? Well, here's the beginning of Judges, chapter 1, verse 27. But Manasseh did not take possession of Bethshean and its villages, and Taanach and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, the inhabitants of Ibleam and its villages, and the inhabitants of Megiddo, valley of Megiddo, Armageddon, and its villages, and Canaanites persisted in living in the land. Here's the intermingling of what happened in Joshua. Again, we're not reading that tonight. And Judges. The Canaanite persisted living in the land. Okay, here's Joshua 24:23. Now, therefore, put away your foreign gods. Joshua 24 is the last chapter. They didn't put away the foreign gods, and that's why even by the time you get to Judges chapter 1, Manasseh, and you'll see others, could not take possession of X, Y, and Z because they did not put away the gods. Little g, O-D-S, those are angels given mastery over geographic areas. They did not put away these gods, okay? And again, why did Manasseh have a problem? I'm going to show you. Manasseh, two arrows point to East Manasseh and West Manasseh, kind of like East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. They are unique. They had land, huge amounts, by the way. Can you see how big that is? On the east and west side. The guys on the east side had trouble, but the guys on the west side had a mess of trouble, and here's why. Can you say Rephaim? Can you say Og, the king of Bashan, was a Rephaim, Nephilim under any other name? There's the two verses for you if you want to look at it. And Mount Hermon, Og. Og is in the red. He's an Amorite. Sihon, also an Amorite. That was the word I couldn't think of. But Og is also king of Bashan. Bashan is even a little further north from my circle, and it's right on the border, and it also contiguous to the areas where, we'll go back to the map of where East Manasseh was supposed to be. Now, big deal. Og, they killed him, right? Yes, they did. Sihon, they killed him. Those guys were Nephilim. And Mount Hermon was in their territory. It was also in Manasseh's territory. Just at the top of, if you can see the Sea of Galilee that I'm showing you here, just at the top of that other little lake, which is no longer there, Hula, I think it is. In that mountainous area at the top of East Manasseh, East Manasseh, is where Mount Hermon was. Tough times for Manasseh because even though Moses, they took the land, you'll be seeing the sons of Anak and the descendants of the Rephaim still roamed the planet, roamed this area on the right side of the river Jordan, given to East Manasseh. Okay. Well, Mount Hermon is ground zero. For what, Bob? Well, for the incident of Genesis 6, where Jude 6 talks about those angels who kept not their first estate, left their proper arranged, what's the word? They left their proper place. They left heaven. They weren't thrown down. They just left. They were very powerful angels. They were called gods, sons of God in Genesis 6. That's where they came down, on Mount Hermon. It's in all the Jewish traditions. It's in the book of Enoch, chapter 6, and it shows up in a million places in the Hebrew scriptures. And as I say here, Og was a Rephaim. There's your two references. And if that doesn't make a sense, Og was the king of Bashan. In Bashan, Psalm 22, David and Jesus, by inference, Psalm 22, was surrounded by the bulls of Bashan. Psalm 22 is where Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it says there he was surrounded, Jesus was, by bulls of Bashan, and so was David. So now, Joshua 12, 1 through 5, what are we doing here? Oh, that's just so you know where Sihon and Og were. Mount Hermon, one of the remnants of the Rephaim. That's just for your own, so you know what we're talking about, and you have it for your records, and you don't think Bob's trying to pull some wool over your eyes. He's not. He's trying to get to Judges. Joshua and Caleb are still here. They were spies. They are leaders. They were older men together in the land. That's all Joshua references. And then Joshua in Judges. Joshua only is showing up in Judges. And then he also, by the way, shows, Judges, yes. But he obviously shows up in Joshua. I wanted you to note these references because we'll get there. It's Judges, and Joshua's still there. But the last chapter of Joshua says he died. So that's why I say the book of Judges and Joshua intermingle at the end, and then it's just Caleb as we move on past chapter 1 and 2, which we'll get to. And then Caleb's, ready for this? We're getting in there. Caleb's younger brother is the first judge. Yay, we're in Judges. We're in Joshua to Judges. And I thought I'd just give you this because there's Jericho. There's Gibeon, the conquest of Canaan. Again, that's the wrong word. You could say partial conquest of Canaan. You could say almost conquest of Canaan. Anyway, and then, of course, down there at the bottom, Caleb's war in the south, which is in Judges 1 and 2, which we're going to get to tonight. Great. So here's an overview of the judges. There they all are, nice men and women all. Some of them would be called minor judges, but we'll have to sort of put that a little on hold as we get into this reading. They're just, and I've given them to you just because, well, I've given a lot here, but we're not going to spend too much time trying to figure out, much from this. I just wanted you to have them all in one place. And you see the one in the middle in the square, Abimelech, or Abimelech, as some want to call him, reigns over Israel. The 4 judges, and then the 7 that are after, and then, of course, Abimelech, or Abimelech, in the middle. It says right in the middle of the book of Judges that they made him king. That's a little presumptuous, but some people think he was a judge. We'll hold out, and then they forgot Shamgar. Whoever put this together, I thought it was great, except Shamgar gets missed. Shamgar is pretty important. How important is Shamgar? There he is on the right. Okay, a little bit misspelled, I'm thinking, but there's Shamgar. And he had this uniform with the cape. That's Shamgar the judge. Okay, there were 11 or 12 judges. We're going to get into each of them as we go into the wild, wild east of Judges. And there's Samuel. He had the dreads. At the bottom, we're pretty sure we have some photographs. This one is not a photograph. This is somebody's cartoon, but we have photographs of Samson with dreadlocks, so okay, maybe not. And there's Abimelech in the middle, one of the 13 that people want to make a judge, but it doesn't say he judged Israel. Some of these also didn't say they judged Israel, but Shamgar did. So not only did I give you the list, but here's where each of the judges were when they did the judging. Again, for your records, some people did some fabulous things, and I really appreciate their work. But here's, I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's only 12. I guess they don't have Abimelech or Abimelech in here, but they do have where Samson was, down there on the left. Where was Deborah? Where's Deborah? I don't see Deborah. There she is in the middle, Ephraim. There you go, good. So Ephraim was where Joshua was. That was his tribe. So I've given you the map just so you know. If you're reading, you can go to the map and say, "Oh, that's where we are." And then I've given you a timetable. How many things does Bob give you? Thousands. It doesn't cost you a cent. There's the judges in the colors, and there's their time periods by chronology. And so if you want to read Judges, which I'm sure you will, because this is getting a little bit boring, you want to actually read the record, you can have who they were and how they judged and when they judged, okay? Great. Getting past all this. And then I wanted to mention the minor judges. Okay, there's some, here's a big one. Moses is called a judge in Exodus 18, and Samuel is a judge in 1 Samuel. So it wasn't like a cut and dried thing. It'll make you start thinking as to where it might have said Joshua is a judge. So I want you guys to look that up. It may be there, it may not. But Samuel certainly is either the 14th judge, because it does say he was a judge, also says he was a prophet. So it's that time period. I know that, what's his name in Acts 7? Who was the guy that was getting before the Sanhedrin? Stephen. It says that the judges were until Samuel, when I think calls him a prophet. But it also says he judged Israel in these 2 places I've given you. So give yourself some fluidity of thinking. It wasn't some, by God, cut and dried thing where there's judges, and why they were given, you can only gather by reading the context, okay? And here are some of what they call the minor judges: Shamgar, Tola, Jair, Ibzan, Lovett, Elon, and Abdon. And they were only minor because there's nothing much in there about what they did. Other judges had a lot more shrift, a lot more stuff written about them. And I've given you these here. If you want to do individual judges search, Deborah there in the middle, and of course, there's Samuel at the edge, judge and prophet. That's why I gave you the reference. So we're back at the map, back at the land. What happened? This is about what the layout looked when they got there, or at least as prescribed in the book of Joshua. And I'm sure it's written elsewhere, but I didn't get into that because by the time Judges is around, they're fighting for their life to keep these areas. Now, one of the fun little areas that you're going to find in the book of Judges, and again, this is an introduction. We're going to read probably the first 2 chapters, and that'll be all we have time for. But the Judges, this is a wild time. This is just crazy. They're on the right side of the Jordan. You've got the Nephilim on the left side. You've got the Canaanite, and the sons of Anak are on both. You know, the descendants of Gath, which are in the bottom left, there's a dude named Goliath that came out of his race however many years later, 300 years later. So they persisted, and they were the main impetus for God taking his anger out and making, not helping them. Maybe they didn't help themselves by worshiping other gods, the gods of the various lands that were given to these tribes. It says the tribes worshiped them, bowed down to them. We'll get to that. So here's the map of the 12 tribes. The one I want you to keep your eye on is on the left side on the Sea of the Mediterranean Sea, south of Ephraim and north of Judah. It's called Dan. And Dan comes up in biblical history in some very interesting ways. Okay? And we'll see this when we get into the book of Judges. I thought this is a better map because it shows Dan with my no longer there mark. And what happened to Dan? They, on their own, decided to move up to where? Mount Hermon. Isn't that just the most interesting thing on the planet? Not only did they leave where God told them to come, they decided there was a better place to be. So they moved up to the land of Bashan, and we'll read that. We won't read it in the first 2 chapters, but we'll read about the exploits of the various tribes, and I just wanted to show you one to be aware of. That one is huge. Why is it huge, you ask? Because they don't show up in the book of Revelation as one of the 12 tribes. And there's a big reason for that. And here's one of them. Okay, so we get to read Judges chapter 1. So hold on to your hats here. We'll take time just to read. And I won't go so fast, but I hope you've got enough gas in your tank to see kind of what we're facing with the book of Judges once Joshua is dead. Now, it came to pass after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, saying, okay, who's going to go up for us first against these very large people to fight against them? Canaanites. Okay, they weren't all large people, but the Canaanites weren't stupid. They had a few Nephilim hanging around. The reason you can get this is by just reading a bunch of the Hebrew scriptures and realizing that you can't have just all giants doing things, Yes, there were fortified cities. There were giants. They had genetic engineering going on, large grapes. And that going on in Egypt with people with dog heads, but that's something else. But the Canaanites were the main adversary. The word Canaanite is used 41 times in Scripture. It's used 14 times in like the first 2 chapters of Judges. It's like, yeah, there were Canaanites, but here they really had some real problems with the Canaanites. Verse 2, the Lord said to Judah, "You're going to go up. Behold, I have given you the land into his hand." Then Judah said to Simeon, his brother, "You want to come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I, in turn, will go with you to the territory allotted you." So Simeon went with him, and Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hands, and they defeated 10,000 at Bezek, and they found Adonai Bezek, which means Lord. Adonai, right? Lord Bezek in Bezek. People love to name things after themselves, right? Aramiah. Anyway, they fought against him, and they defeated the Canaanites and Perizzites. Okay, not only did they fight them, they defeated them. And Adonai Bezek fled, and they pursued him, caught him, cut off his thumbs and big toes. Why do you do that? I don't know. Somebody look it up. Adonai Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to gather up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. So they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. Jerusalem was in the area. Should we go back and just see where Jerusalem was, just for giggles? Jerusalem, do they show Jerusalem? It's where Benjamin was, right there in the middle, near Judah. Oh, no, it's in Judah. So the reason they could take him in Judah was because Judah controlled it. But there were other people in Jerusalem called Jebusites, one of the 6 or 7 ites that we call, and they didn't get driven out until David drives them out and captures their capital, which is Zion, the Jebusites in Zion. So, just for talking purposes, they took Adonai Bezek back to Jerusalem, and the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem, captured it, struck it with the edge of the sword, and they set the city on fire. Afterwards, the sons of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites living in the hill country, in the Negev, and the lowland. Why? Because their buddy Simeon lived there. Okay, and they went there. So Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron is Kirjath Arba. And they struck Shishai and Ahiman and Talmi. We saw that they were what? Sons of Anak, from a former scripture reference I gave you. Okay? Now, just so you know, Judah, up at the top there, was the tribe of Caleb. Good thing to know, because Caleb plays a pretty big part in the beginning chapters of Judges. He's a big dude. He's a hero. Why is he a hero? Well, we'll find out. Then from there, he went up against the inhabitants of Debir. This is the sons of Judah, the tribe of Judah. Now, in the name of Debir, formerly Kiriath Sefer is the word for book, by the way, Caleb said. And why does Caleb say here? Because he's part of the tribe of Judah. And we're in the context of what Judah's doing with his sidekick, Simeon. So Caleb, in his inimitable way, says, the one who attacks Kiriath Sefer and captures it, I will give him my daughter, Aksa for wife. So Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, did it, right? So Caleb gave him his daughter. There were no problems with intermarriage there. His daughter, Aksa. Then it came about that when she came to him, meaning Caleb, that she persuaded him came to Othniel. She persuaded him to ask her father for a field. Then she alighted from her donkey. And Caleb said to her, what do you want? She said, typical conversation between a father and a daughter. Okay, what do we want now? My allowance. How much do you get per week? 50 cents. What are you going to buy? Nothing. Anyway, verse 15. She said to him, give me a blessing. Sound familiar? Sounds Middle Eastern, Near Eastern. Sounds like Isaac, Jacob, right? Since you have given me the land of the Negev, desert, give me the springs of water. So it's pretty obvious. Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. The descendants of the Kenite, that means, what's his mug? Jethro, the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of palms and the sons of Judah to the wilderness of Judah, which is in the south of Arad, and they went and lived with the people. The people is typically an acronym, not an acronym, a technical term for the Israelites. Then Judah went up with Simeon. Okay, here's where he goes with Simeon and his brother. So all from beginning to now, from through verse 17, it's all been Judah, Judah, Judah. Now Judah went with Simeon to his brother. They struck the Canaanite. Of course, it's the Canaanite living in Zephath, and it utterly destroyed it. Yay! And so the name of the city was called Hormah, and Judah took Gaza, which you know where Gaza is. That's on the seashore, with its territory, and Askelon with its territory, Ekron with its territory. Now the Lord was with Judah, and they took possession of the hill country. But here it is, they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had iron chariots. Oh my goodness. And they gave Hebron to Caleb and Moses as Moses had promised, but Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, which we just read about. Big deal here. So there's a lot of back and forth between driving these Canaanites out and not. I just mentioned that even though it says that the tribe of Judah did a job in Jerusalem, and you can read it, we just read it in this slide, that they captured and struck it with the edge of the sword. It shows up later that the Jebusites are still in that area, and there's reasons for it. You'll see it in the book of Judges, really bad reasons, but the Jebusites are still there when David finally takes Zion and makes it his city, the city of God, the city of Zion, during his reign in like around 700 BC. So, chapter 1, verse 21 through 26. But the sons of Benjamin didn't drive out the Jebusites. Oh, there it is right there. The Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So I was right. It was Benjamin that controlled Jerusalem, not Judah. So that map we saw, I've got to fix it, or I've got to find a map that shows that Jerusalem was really the Benjamite capital, right? City of Benjamin. Who had to go there on another donkey much later to Bethlehem, which is also a city of Benjamin, because who was a Benjamite? Joseph. So the Jebusites lived there with the sons of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. And then you got to wonder what this day was. Why would the prophet write to this day? Well, I have some theories about this. Some of you may or may not like it, but I'm going to say them nonetheless. I believe in holy editors that this was written during the time of David. Might even been David who wrote this. You can't tell it, but when you see stuff like this that's layered in here, you realize that there's a hand in here, a holy hand, I'm saying, that says, we've got these guys hanging around here to this day. Well, I'm sorry, not David, those before David, because David captures the Jebusite city of Jerusalem. Okay? That's what I meant to say. I misstated it. Verse 22, I think you know what I meant. Likewise, the house of Joseph went up against Bethel. The house of Joseph spied out. Now the name of the city was Luz, and the spies saw a man coming out of the city and said to him, show us how to get in the city, and we'll treat you kindly. So he showed them the entrance to the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword, but they let the man and his family go free. Nice guys, really nice guys. The man went to the land of the Hittites, which is basically Asia Minor, Turkey, and the city was built and named, he built a city and named it Luz, which is its name. Again, the word is to this day. Just little things that show up in the text. I didn't highlight that one, but I might before I send out the PDF. So let's finish the chapter. The Manasseh couldn't do a job, verse 27. Ephraim blew it, verse 29. Asher blew it, verse 31. And so did Naphtali. Now, that's not all of the tribes. I think that's Judah and Simeon, good. Benjamin, house of Joseph, not as good. Joseph really wasn't a tribe yet, or was it? Can't remember. Manasseh, Ephraim, Asher, and Naphtali, not so good. And what was the problem? The big S-O in the middle of each of those contexts. So the Canaanite persisted. So the Canaanite lived. So the Canaanite lived among them, and so forth, so forth. So the last section here, verse 34. Then the Amorites forced, there they are, the sons of Dan into the hill country. Now that didn't mean all the way up north. This is the hill country of their own area. I can show you that in the geography of where Dan was given land. But this isn't the Dan being forced north. This is just Dan being forced into the hill country. Why? Because of these Amorites, for they did not allow them to come into the valley. Yet the Amorites persisted in living in Mount Heres, in Aijalon, and in Shaalbim. And when the power of the house of Joseph grew strong, they became forced labor. Amorites. Now, what are the Amorites doing on the left side of Jordan? Somebody needs to look at that and come back and tell me, because the Amorite kingdoms, Og, king of Bashan, Sihon, king of the Amorites, they're on the right side of Jordan. The Amorites, but sometimes you'll find that the prophet or whoever wrote this during the days of before David, the Amorites and the Canaanites are just a title for the very powerful clans that lived in these areas and had Nephilim in their tow. I'll have to show you some of that along the way here as we just keep reading the record. So yet the Amorites persisted in living in Mount Heres. The border of the Amorites ran from the ascent of Akrobim from Selah and upward. You have to look these up. We're not going to look them up tonight. So finally we get to chapter 2, and I think we're only going to get to chapter 2, which is all I prepared for tonight. Here we have the angel of the Lord showing up. And why is he showing up? Here's why. Came up from Gilgal to Bochum, and he said, I brought you out of Egypt, you idiots. That's in the text. I just didn't put it. I brought you out of Egypt, led you into the land which I've sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. But as for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You shall tear down their altars. By the way, you didn't do it. But you have not obeyed me. What is this that you have done? Or it's like, what's wrong with you? This is the angel of the Lord. Follow his, that's a teaching in and of itself. He shows up and you just like cringe. You don't want to, oh, God is the angel of the Lord again. Oh my God, what's he going to say this time? So therefore, I will not drive them out before you. That's his pronunciation. But they will become, as there's thorns in your sides, their gods will be a snare unto you, as they always are. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, the people said, wait a minute. No, they wept. They said, wait a minute, a little bit later. So they named the place Bochum, and they were there. They sacrificed to the Lord. Maybe we can make it up. Just sacrifice to the Lord. Come on, let's do it real quick. But when Joshua had dismissed the people, wait a minute, in the book of Judges, who's this guy? It's the Joshua you know and love, seeping into the book of Judges, even though he's dead in the book of Joshua. And the chapter 1, he was dead. But he sort of seeps in here. Be aware of it. Joshua. But so when Joshua had dismissed the people, and if you want to get a full picture of this, go back and read Joshua 24, because this is really the same kind of record. He dismissed the people. The sons of Israel went each to their inheritance to possess their land. The people served the Lord. all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen the great work of the Lord. That would include Caleb, of course, and a few others from 20 years up, it said. They survived the 40 years, which the Lord, had done for Israel. Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died a third time at the age of 110. He didn't. It's just the confluence of records. And they buried him, finally. I think the word buried him, we're not going to see him again. So that's good. In the territory of his inheritance, he was of the tribe of Ephraim. So that would be Timnath-Heres, in the country of Ephraim, north of Mount Mount Gash. And all the generations also were gathered to their fathers. All that generation, which generation? The guys that wandered in the wilderness, folks, were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord. Now, whose fault is that? It could be one of the other ones. Either they didn't teach them well or the kids didn't listen. That happens, folks. Nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. Again, Joshua dead. Here he's buried. Is it whack-a-mole? Does he come back up again? I don't think so. I give you Joshua. What I did is went back and copied the area that is referenced in Judges here. This is Joshua 24, when it came about after these things that Joshua, the son of Nun, servant of the Lord, died. But what happens earlier in Joshua 24 is what is referenced in Judges chapter 2. This was just so you saw that he died a second time and then a third time at the end of Joshua. Let's go back to this. Enough of the joke stuff. Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. You think? And they served the Baals. The Baals. That's the word for their gods. It's the word master in Hebrew. It's just the wrong masters. And they forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them forth on the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were around them. They bowed themselves down. They provoked the Lord to anger. You think an angel of the Lord, I always, I don't know. I think of the angel of the Lord. The thing that comes to mind is some movies. Sorry about the references, but this is from like one of the Thor movies, The Destroyer, because at times he is the destroyer, the angel of the Lord. Well, anyway, you can't stop him, man. All he's doing is what God told him to do, just burn things. Verse 13 here in Judges chapter 2, the mind of Minolta, the mind of Bob, how he thinks about Bible things. Verse 13, so they went and they forsook the Lord. They served Baal and the Ashtaroth. We'll get into that some other time. He's a fisherman. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel. He gave them into the hands of, here we are, the plunderers who plundered them. That's a Hebraism. And he sold them into the hands of the enemies around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil. I think we know what that means. As the Lord had spoken, and as the Lord had sworn to them, so that they were, what? Severely distressed. I guess we could tear apart that. Maybe we will before we move on to chapter 3. We're not done with 2 yet, but next time. Finally, we get the formality of the judges stated. It takes us it's like the book of Joshua is like sticky. It's like sticky paper. It just keeps hanging around. We can't get rid of the book of Joshua, but finally in Judges 2, 16, 18, we do. Then the Lord raised up judges. Well, yay. Who delivered them from the hands of those with who plundered them. There's the plundering again. Yet they did not listen to their judges. Are we surprised? No. And they played the harlot after other gods, and they bowed themselves down to them, and they turned aside quickly from the way in which their fathers had walked, obeying the commandments of the Lord. That's the way you obey. Obey is better than sacrifice. Stated 1,000,000 times. That one's by Samuel. They did not do as their fathers. When the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge and delivered them from the hand of their enemies in the day of the judge, for the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed and afflicted them. So we're introduced to Judges, finally, and the book of Judges continues, and we'll just finish out this context and have a little talk maybe. I think this might be the last of the chapter. But it came to pass when the judge died, any of the 13 or 14, that they would turn back and act more corruptly. Can you say that? More corruptly than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them, bow down to them. They did not abandon their practices or their stubborn ways. I think we should tear those words apart and see what that means, right? So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not listened to my voice, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died. Yeah, Joshua, there he is again. I'm sorry, he's popping up. It is whack-a-mole. In order to test Israel by them, whether they will keep the way of the Lord, to walk in it as their fathers did, or not. I love that. Or not. So the Lord allowed those nations to remain. Who do you figure those? Canaanites, Perizzites, Hittites, Hivites, Amorites, Jebusites, a bunch of ites, not driving them out quickly. And he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. Wait a minute, but I just read in Joshua that it said he gave them rest round about. It's not a contradiction. It's just a different layer of biblical tradition, if you will. It doesn't contradict. You can read in Joshua they didn't drive out everybody. But, I think that the prophets kept wanting to see it happen. They wanted to see it happen, But it says here, so the Lord allowed those nations, the one that had gods, of course, we know that from the Tower of Babel, not driving them out quickly, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. So my last statement here tonight, the land was never occupied as it was supposed to have been. Have been. Critical. It is critical that you understand this as a Christian. The old covenant, the one that's talked about right there in the middle. The Israelites transgressed it. They did so continually in the Hebrew Scriptures, especially in the book of Judges, as we will find as we continue reading. The land promise from that verse in Ephesians, promised covenants of promise, the land promise, the throne promise, and the new covenant promise of nobody's going to need to teach their neighbors nothing. None of them have come to pass. So the old covenant is not gone yet. It can't be, because the land ain't in Israel's hands. And that's why dispensationalism had its birth in the mid-1800s, because no one could explain away that particular issue. Well, except covenant theologians that want the land to be the church, which, oh my goodness, how bad is it? How bad can we get? So please take from this particular teaching the last section of that judge's record, and realize that the old covenant, one of the covenants of promise, has not yet been fulfilled. That's the first session on the book of Judges, or the first session on the Wild Wild East. Part 1 is the book of Judges, and we'll get into lots of other things. A lot to digest there, a lot of slides that you're going to want to go back and see, but one of the great things is you see that that the land and as you read Judges on your own, if you want to, until you see another one of these sessions come up, the land is never tied down. You've got the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, all the ites still in there, and it's a fascinating record. I will recommend a couple of books for you. Michael Heiser's book Supernatural, and his book, what's the one on Hermon? Does anybody have it? Recapturing Mount Hermon, where his thesis is close enough to mine to, you think I might have stole it, but we had been working on a lot of this in parallel at the time, and how he shows the Nephilim clans, the Rephaim clans in the land, just waiting. By God, they were just waiting for the children of Israel, and how, of course, they stuck around even after that, waiting for Jesus. Bulls of Bashan surround me. So the things that you learn as you go from Israel's history, stop the coming one. Stop him at all costs. Don't let him put his foot outside the womb. Okay? Don't let that baby happen. Just
question,
go ahead.
Bob.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we have the flood. We're supposed to get rid of all these bad guys, right? That infected the human species here.
Yeah.
Now, I was always under the impression that the Nephilim were wiped out. So how did they get back? Was there a genetic continuance? Or was there another infiltration?
That's what Bullinger posits. There's a number of different ways in which we know that they showed back up, because we know that Goliath came during the period of the kings, and we know that the sons of Anak persist after Noah, of course, and all this stuff. It's a subject that's probably better handled all at once. I have my own opinions that I just don't think we're all wiped out. So,
okay, so they got on their own little boats, maybe.
Well, it has to do with the Near Eastern concept of a flat Earth, Rachel.
Okay.
And
they're paddling around in circles.
Yeah, really. No, they didn't have their own boat. They didn't have their own boats, but they were places other than the land of Israel. So
gotcha. Okay.
So we know that, and I could say that, maybe they built the pyramids. That might have happened, and maybe they were in what's that other place that we see pyramids?
South America.
South America, the ones that are over in Thailand. I mean,
yeah.
Angels, the sons of God, were not stupid.
Right.
And they knew there was a flood coming. Now,
right. Okay.
Was it, we're not even, well, you can't get into this. This is going to take us too far away.
Well, I know.
But that's a fabulous question. A fabulous question that deserves a really detailed answer. But,
Rich, I got a quick one. Does anybody have a good book on the kind of outlining or listing all the promises in the Old Covenant and references and things? I imagine they're just scattered throughout the Old Testament, right?
Yeah, I don't know, Richard. That's a good question. Yeah, I imagine you could Google it, and make sure you're following through all the various places. I know that's a good question. Let me write that one down too. Holy smoke, you guys. Good questions, and I don't have answers to everything. So the next Nephilim, that was Rachel, and then the promises. Now, Michael Lewis might know the promises because he works promises and covenants a lot. Promises in the Old Covenant. Now, see, that would get us into, what is the Old Covenant, right? Because the Davidic covenant is part of the Old, but it stands on its own. The Abrahamic is part of the Old. the Noahicism, because that got fulfilled and went away. But that's really a good question there too, Rich. I'll take a look at it and see what I can find too.
Is there Bob?
Yeah.
Who are the judges? Were they ever named?
Oh yeah, I gave you a list in that whole.
Yeah.
Oh,
I gave you a list.
There's 12 of them. There's 14.
12.
12, maybe 14. If you throw
14.
Abimelech in there, might be 15. If you want to consider, and I don't think I've shown anywhere, or you could show that Joshua was one, but I imagine that the characteristics apply. But yeah, I gave you a list in that PDF. So when you get the PDF,
Okay.
There were 12 or 13 of them, and we're going to get to them. I don't know if we'll get to. The first one was Othniel, Caleb's younger brother, who married his daughter. So pretty wild. Well, I told you, wasn't Wild West Virginia? Sorry, Michael.
I want to gain more understanding
I
about
said it though. I
Lord.
did say it. It did come out of my mouth.
Hey, Bob, I want to get a little bit bigger understanding about the angel of the Lord. This is a fierce dude, right? So he isn't anybody to mess around with. And you said he another term for him was the destroyer.
You know, I can't. I just.
No, that was from Thor.
Yeah. It was from Thor. It was from Thor. But I said I envisioned him like the destroyer because, he didn't take anything. And that's why, that record that said, look, I'm going to send the angel of the Lord. Don't talk to him. just do what he says. Just get this. I get this mind picture of, I don't know, this recalcitrant, this really stern grandfather that doesn't want to talk to, and just follow me, okay? There's the pillar of fire behind, there's the pillar of whatever in front of me. Just do it, and don't ask any questions. So I also, Rachel, think that you're right, that he's a dude. My personal opinions do not matter. Somebody work every reference to the
Did they know he was an
and
angel?
get back to us.
Did the Israelites know he was an angel from the Lord?
It says they did.
Well, they informed him.
Well,
I think that's
an
your
angel. Why
calling.
would you listen to him?
I think that's your calling, Paul. You have to do this now. Find out if they knew who he really was, or whether he was this just guy in a white suit with a big sword.
Bronze looking.
With
I
what?
want to mention here something
Bronze.
Oh, bronze.
here. Yeah.
What, Paul?
Oh,
I like your shirt. Where did you get that shirt?
my brother just gave it to me.
Moab, or is that Modab?
It's Moab, Utah.
That really fits. That's awesome. Moab. What does it say underneath it? Oh,
Utah.
Utah.
Okay.
Utah.
Why would you? Did you want Moab? I know that's because of the.
I didn't even know I just pulled it out of the drawer and it fit, so.
I love the shirt. I love the shirt.
Moab.
Moab. I'm gonna get one that says Canaanites. No. Akron.
A statement that I thought was interesting. I'm glad I ran into this tonight in one of the Judges 2:22, because this is another verse that proves that God doesn't know everything.
Which was, go ahead and read it. What does it say?
It says that through them I may prove Israel whether they will keep the way of the Lord to walk therein as their fathers did keep it or not.
See?
So he
That's
doesn't know.
beautiful. That is awesome that you see just from that one little or not.
I know. It's like cool because I was looking for another verse to sort of like mention
Wow.
that, show people.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
great.
that's deep right there. 222.
Yep. If God knows everything, then why did he ask Abraham?
Yeah. Or not. That's great. See, now these nights are truly a blessing to me to be able to hear that kind of stuff come out of it. And
Also, you was wanting to know about the thumbs and the toes. Why would they cut those off?
Yeah.
And the thumbs, you cut those off so you can't grab a hold and hold on to anything worth anything. And the big toes, when you cut those off, you lose your balance. You can't stand up good at all. So that's going to slow you way down.
So that's like spears for battle and running after the enemy. That's a really good point.
Yeah, but it also says they did that because that's what he did to the
Yeah, maybe
70.
too that. Yep.
So it's
Okay.
payback.
Paybacks, they say. And I didn't use that word on this.
Was
Isn't it
he
nice that
related to the Nephilim by any chance? The six?
that guy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if he's ever mentioned again.
We're gonna whack off your digit there. Your six.
Well, what is it? Well, yeah, it says in the book of Kings or Samuel, maybe it's Chronicles, about the Nephilim had six toes on one hand, or 6 toes on one foot and 6 fingers on another, which comes up in the movie The Princess Bride.
Oh, yes, it
Another
does.
reference.
He's got 6 fingers on one foot and 6 toes on another hand.
Yeah,
Or vice
6 toes on his other hand. Right, Paul. That's what I said. I misspoke. Okay, guys.